Well, after 4 days, I've kind of lost my voice a little bit, but we're gonna see what we can do here. First off, thank you for having me here tonight. I appreciate you very much. My name is Roland Gutierrez. I am a Texas Senator from San Antonio. My district is bigger than most states, thanks to Republican redistricting. How many of you know where Seguin is? All right, I starred in Seguin. How many of you know where Big Bend is? Marathon, Texas.
Whoa.
All the way to Marathon.
Oh, not Alpine?
Well, I'll tell you what, something happened last redistricting. They cut Brewster County and they cut Reeves and Pecos. So I couldn't get Reeves and Pecos back. But for the first time ever, I loved Alpine so much and Brewster County so much, we split it in two. So they have two senators. Can you imagine? All 70 people. I'm kidding, there's a few more than that. But I got the part with 70 people. I got the part that's Big Bend. It is my wife and I and my children. It's where we go to unplug and disconnect. Literally, your cell phone doesn't work, which really pisses off my kids, by the way. But they get to hang out with their dad and pay attention at least. If you'd asked me a year ago, prior to May 24th, if I was ever going to run for the United States Senate, I'd have told you were crazy. To your point, why? Something happened on that day that what happened that day and what happened in the days and months after that. I quickly went from being a Texas senator to a private investigator, trying to find out what these cops had done and had not done. We had state agencies lying to us, literally telling us different stories and not accepting accountability. We had a governor who never accepted accountability to this day. We had an attorney general that wouldn't take victims' compensation funds and give them to the people in an appropriate way. These people had lost their children in a horrible tragedy, as you know. They waited for 77 minutes for cops to go in there and do their jobs. It never happened. I had to sue the government to get the information. I lost the lawsuit, and then I finally succumbed because I always said, we'll give it to you, as long as you sign a non-disclosure agreement. So I signed a non-disclosure agreement, and they gave me a hard drive about the size of my phone, and I saw all of it. And I saw all of the failure. I saw all of the negligence. I saw all of the horror as well. And I saw what this gun does to little babies. And I'm not gonna bring you down tonight into that horror. I'm just not. But I then tried to do something about it. And I'm a gun owner. I own a few guns. I don't own any one of these types of guns. Just part of growing up in South Texas. I wanted to just increase an age limit to access this type of weapon. And even when I felt confident because there was polls happening during the legislative session this 8 months later, and Republican voters were agreeing with me. And Republican voters were saying we need these extreme risk protective orders. If a crazy kid makes a threat, let's go get his guns for a few days to find out what's going on. And Republican voters were saying let's close the gun show loophole because you can buy a gun at a gun show without even so much as showing your driver's license. So I felt really vindicated because I had Republican voters be in favor. The Democrats were polling at 78%. The Republican voters on these three issues at 65%. And I thought we could do something, and you saw what happened, absolutely nothing. And so spent that session just trying to get something done in a place that it's very, very difficult for Democrats to get anything done. And so I came away with all of it just completely frustrated. And this run for the United States Senate is more compulsion than ambition. My day job, I'm an immigration lawyer. I build a few houses every year. I like doing that. One time, my wife and we opened an Italian restaurant to honor our Italian heritage. I'm kidding, I'm not Italian. That's the real question as to why. I don't know why I did that. But I thought that was the craziest thing I'd ever done. And then I decided to run for the U.S. Senate against Ted Cruz. But I'll tell you this, we are truly, truly living in a time in this state where we deserve so much better from government. We all pay into this system. We pay our taxes, and yet we do not get in this state the benefit of the bargain. I decided to run because I'm tired of their big lie. They talk about this big lie about January 6th and all that crap. And that's all it is crap. The big lie is that we're living in some kind of Texas miracle. And that's just simply not true. We are not living in a Texas miracle. This is a great state, and we all deserve so much more than we've gotten from it. But it's what's so miraculous about 800 people dying when it gets cold. What's so miraculous about children being braver than cops, waiting for 77 minutes to be rescued? What's so miraculous about every one of those 400 cops blocking all of the streets? Couldn't get ambulances in, didn't fly the helicopters in. 4 souls were lost on the way to the hospital. You didn't know that. The teacher, one of them, sat there in an ambulance for 45 minutes after the 77 because they couldn't get her out to a hospital. She died. That is a broken state of affairs. You know, when you look at everything from educational performance to health care, we're dead last on mental health care funding in rural areas. We're 45th in education funding. You all know all of these things. By God, we deserve so much more, and we can do them. So I got to looking at all of this. I got to looking at guys like Ted Cruz, who just perpetuates this nonsense. He's just not a serious person. And when you elect someone to office, you expect them to at least be serious. And here this old boy's got us looking at Barbie dolls and China, maps of China, and he's talking about Bud Light like that's something that should matter to us. You know what? He voted against $66 billion that came to Texas in the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act. Can you believe that? So I get that this man thinks that, you know.
Well, he's bragging about it.
Oh, no, not quite the contrary. He's going to the ribbon cuttings now. He's going to the ribbon cuttings now and taking credit for something he voted against when he voted against the bipartisan agreement. That means jobs. When we were kids, all of us, I don't know congressman from this area. I mentioned Mickey Leland the other night from Harris. Who was your congressman 30 years ago from this area? Anybody?
Bob Casey.
Bob Casey. Democrat or Republican? Democrat. Bob Casey. I'm sure Bob would come back to town and say, you know that highway out there, I brought that $50 million or that $25 million. And that $25 million created all of these jobs and allowed people to build the American dream anymore. We just don't. And we have this old boy voting against money that comes to our state that creates jobs and allows people to get just into the middle class. The middle class isn't the same as it once was when I was a child.
I'm sorry, you said 30 years ago. We had the same type of low life.
That's not the way.
Not the way.
Yeah, no, he's the worst low life.
I was thinking 50 years ago. I'm sorry.
Well, we need Bob Casey back. You know, so we had a guy back when I was a kid in 1975. I was born in 70. His name was Henry B. Gonzalez. And he brings stuff to us. And somehow that got to be some bad word called pork. Well, that pork was a highway, it was a library, it was a hospital. And it created the infrastructure that made us great in this country. And we've got this guy that votes against that piece. I get that he has to be this hyper-partisan guy, but he can't even vote for the things that make a difference for our community. The things, because I guess he might think it's Joe Biden's idea. We need something, we need people that are far more serious than that. Voted against the broadband bill, because out in Alpine, good luck, you know, getting signal out there and the things that you need to be the basic learning that kids take for granted here out in West Texas and in rural areas. They don't have it. $300 million of your tax dollars coming back to Texas. We deserve a senator that's going to say, create a law, an amendment to the Affordable Care Act that says we're not going to let rogue governors like Greg Abbott say no to Medicaid expansion. You know, we all talk about this, right? Medicaid expansion. I know you all know what it is. A lot of people don't. They think it's, more insurance for poor people. It's insurance for sure. But it's insurance for working class Texans that don't have insurance. Well, this guy, for lack of a better word, this dude does nothing about it because he doesn't care about anybody. I doubt he even cares about the so-called Republican working class, because those men and women are certainly voting against their best interest. They're certainly been bamboozled by somebody. And so we're going to have a talk with everybody that'll listen about what we deserve from our elected leaders. We deserve serious people. And so I made this decision to come out and not just talk to you tonight, but to go around Texas talking about what we needed to do. Someone pointed out something on my flyer about this winning coalition. Listen, I think that, I think Beto O'Rourke did a wonderful job for us. He got people excited and moving in the right direction. And I think his values were amazing. I think that there were some things along the way that kind of took away where we lost a few votes. And that was probably on the gun thing. And listen, he was about as impassioned as I am about Uvalde as to what happened in El Paso. And so I get why he said it. But again, I'm from South Texas and I understand this. I understand what my constituents feel about guns, but we have to actually take a different approach. And it's the approach that we all kind of grew up in this state, is that we need to make sure that young people don't hurt themselves and others in the right way. And so this winning coalition is going to be about every one of us that gets out there and votes our values. But it's even bigger than that. I'm going to give you some numbers. There is that election against Cruz. The Democrats had 5.3 million voters. The Republicans had 5.6, roughly, a little less than that, spread. So let's tell you that spread is 300,000. Let's just take a basic functionality of the 40 or so that are in here. Across this state, I go to meetings like this, in San Antonio, in the Valley and beyond. And when I go to them over and over again in San Antonio, it's always the same folks. I know y'all are going to vote. I know you're going to do this. But it really is 300,000. I would tell you there's 1 million people in Harris and surrounding counties, out here in Brazoria and in Galveston and Fort Bend, that are not voting. And how are we going to get them? How are we going to drag them out? That core Democratic base in Texas is about 500,000. It's all of y'all. It's the party faithful. I'm going to ask you to do the power of one. You're going to take one kid, some nephew, some niece, some kid that's working in here that says my vote doesn't count, and you're going to take them, and you're going to take them to vote. Maybe if it's some relative of yours, you take away their phone for 20 minutes. You say, sorry, we're going to discipline you the new way. My wife says I can't spank my kids anymore, but she says I can take their phones away.
Works like a charm.
It works. It's the best thing in the world. It's better than a spanking, I'll tell you. And so my kids are too old to be spanked, by the way. But here's the thing. We can do this, and it really is the power of each and every one of us party faithful in this state, finding one new voter, some 18-year-old kid that says, oh, mañana, my vote doesn't count, nothing's going to affect me. There's a whole mess of things that this session that these horrible people messed with. And none of it was about helping people with the bills. None of it was about helping people with their health care costs or education or doing anything. It was all about picking on people. It was all about burning books. Can you imagine that? We've dumbed down this state to nothing. And it's only so that they can stay in power. And in 3 weeks, we're going to be back in there for a trial. They're going to let that dude go, I'm sure. In a few more weeks after that, we're going to be in a voucher session because he wants to go help 160,000 kids go to a private school. What about the other 4.8 million? I mean, how does any of that make sense? So we've got to talk to people, and even talk to Republicans, but just take that one kid out, that one young person, and have them exercise their civil rights. And I promise you that we can win this thing. And the reason they need to do that is because 19 little kids and 2 teachers lost their lives. That's why. We all owe it to them. I want to thank you all, and I want to open it up for questions. There's a lot I left out, I'm sure. It's been a long 4 days, and I've lost my voice a little bit, but I'm glad to take any of your questions.